South Africa, the 1950s. The country was under the system of apartheid. People were segregated by their race, which was legally defined as white, Indian, coloured, or black. Whites were given the highest status, blacks were given the lowest. Among black communities, a song was catching fire.
Dance into dim, my very food. Dance into dim, my very food.
It carried a pointed message for the Prime Minister of South Africa, Hendrik Verwoerd.
Be careful of the black man.
Those were the lyrics. Beware, Verwoerd, the black man is coming. The song was an underground hit, with friends and neighbours teaching it to each other. But to sing it could be dangerous.
Police were all over. And then if you hear singing the song, you can be easily be under arrest.
Even the fear of imprisonment couldn't stop the song from spreading. And the man who wrote it didn't fear the power of the state. His name was Vuyisile Mini. He sang at anti-apartheid rallies, projecting his booming baritone voice right into the faces of white Afrikaners who tried to intimidate the protesters.
Afrikaners were very tough and strong. They were tall, hefty men, but you can challenge them. You could face them.
Throughout the 1950s, the movement against apartheid was developing a new energy. The message at the heart of Mini's song was that apartheid was violence, and violence had to be met with violence. The black man is coming, he said, and he meant it personally. He knew he'd have to put his life on the line. For BBC Radio 4, this is History's Heroes. People with purpose, brave ideas, and the courage to stand alone. I'm Alex von Tunzelmann. I'm a historian, and today's episode is about the union organiser Vuyisile Mini. From the dawn of the apartheid era, he worked to topple the regime. But just as powerful as his protests was his talent for music and poetry. He inspired countless people to join the struggle for freedom, but this set him on a collision course with the forces of apartheid. 1948. There was a federal election in South Africa. The Nationalist Party proposed to reshape the country radically. In a surprise result, they won. They put in place a new system, apartheid.
That was a policy of the day. Apartheid, meaning separateness.
Vuyisile Douglas Tutu is 90 years old and a veteran of the struggle against apartheid. He lives in Gqeberha, formerly known as Port Elizabeth. He joined the anti-apartheid movement in 1952.
I happened to be among the people whilst I was still young who were saying, Maibuye Africa.
Maibuye Africa. The phrase means, come back, Africa. This became the rallying cry for the movement against the new system of apartheid. Tutu's involvement with that struggle brought him into contact with a charismatic union organiser, Vuyisile Mini.
In those days, people used to come together in gatherings where people were taught how to fight the government of the day.
At the time, Mini was in his early 30s and already well experienced within the protest movement. He was born in Somo, a small town in a remote, arid region known as the Transkei. There weren't many jobs in Somo.
There was no industry at all. Hence, people were flocking now to bigger cities to get some work where they can earn money.
His father relocated the family to Port Elizabeth, a seaport in the Eastern Cape province. There, he found a job as a dock worker. Mini's father became involved in labour activism. When his son finished elementary school, he encouraged him to take up the cause too. The apartheid state didn't recognise black unions as legitimate. So Mini's father was taking a risk, and now so was Mini himself. But he believed passionately that the country had more than enough natural wealth for everyone to prosper.
Mini was keen to keep people understanding that everything was in the hands of the workers, who were mostly the indigenous people of this country, but they were lacking now weapons to fight people that were enslaving them.
He founded a union for painters and builders and another for dock workers. The state security police often disrupted their meetings. White men filled up the seats in the hall, trying to block non-whites from entering. Though the regime was getting more and more aggressive, Mini wouldn't be intimidated.
Mini can go around telling these security police they must get out because people must sit.
In colonial South Africa, institutional racism had been a fact of life since the 19th century. But with the advent of the National Party, it took on a radical new form.
Their idea was that each race had its own biologically determined identity and abilities as laid down by God.
Jill Kelly is an associate professor of history at Southern Methodist University, who works on the apartheid era in South Africa.
South Africans navigated laws that prohibited sex or marriage across races, legislation that determined where each person could live and work. It undermined Black education and really policed Black South Africans on a daily basis.
The apartheid regime ripped up the country in order to rebuild it as a bastion of white supremacy. Non-whites were thrown out of their homes to create zones of habitation reserved exclusively for whites. Black people were resettled on what the government called Bantustans, or homelands. The Bantustans were theoretically granted independence, but these so-called nations were situated on land that lacked crucial resources and infrastructure.
South Africans' apartheid policies not only distinguished white from Black, but sought to develop these ideas of the Zulu nation or the Xhosa nation, and to do so in a way that would allow them to portray to the rest of the world that they too were part of decolonization movements.
There'd been elements of segregation in South Africa before, but now it was rigidly formalised. If a Black person needed to enter a white area, they had to carry a pass.
Police could stop Black South Africans on the street and demand a pass. Failure to have it could mean imprisonment. There are all kinds of stories of young people seeing their parents torn from their beds for not having passes and the right to live in the city.
The Black areas were often distant from the cities where the jobs were. For many Black people, this meant hours riding buses in order to get to work every day. The buses were strictly segregated. What was more, the authorities kept raising the fares. In Port Elizabeth, Mini organised a boycott.
Black South Africans refused to use buses after a rise in fares. It seemed not incredibly burdensome, but in terms of the low wages of Black South Africans was quite a burden.
The boycotters simply demonstrated what would happen if they walked to work instead of taking a bus. They arrived late, or not at all. They hoped this would grind production to a halt. Vuyisile Tutu joined the boycott. In the end, he remembers, the bus fares were only slightly reduced.
Only a penny was taken off.
The boycott didn't lower fares to a comfortable level or desegregate the system. But it showed that Black South Africans could unite in large-scale political efforts. Mini was quickly gaining a reputation. He had a great ability to form coalitions among disparate and conflicting groups. People called him the organiser of the unorganised. One of the ways he achieved this was through music.
Music filled a number of functions in the struggle, especially for those without the legal means of opposition or access to arms for fighting. It could be used to mobilize people, to threaten or defy authorities, to mourn people lost to exile or in state violence, and to liberate oneself.
Mini began to write protest songs. Sometimes they were forceful warnings to the government. He wrote in one song, "We will shoot with cannons and they will flee."
He was inciting people to take stand against Dr. Verwoerd.
But other songs had a romantic or nostalgic tone. In response to the forced relocations, he wrote a song that translates as, "Take up your things, brother, and let's go. They're waiting, our mothers and fathers at home." Another song, "We Cry for Our Land," began, "We mourn for our land which was taken by the whites. Zulus, Xhosas, Sutus unite."
People were so taken up in a very positive way to his music.
Mini's music was often heard at meetings of the African National Congress, or ANC. This was a political party founded in 1912 to advocate for the rights of black South Africans. Mini joined the local branch of the ANC, and when the party gathered, he was the first to stand up.
I can remember he used to sing for the gatherings of the ANC when meetings are opened. He had a powerful voice and beautiful baritone.
His songs stirred the spirit of resistance. This was a crucial moment in 1952 when the ANC was preparing its first full-scale assault on the apartheid regime. But this assault was to be non-violent, focused on civil disobedience. They called it the Defiance campaign against unjust laws.
Trained volunteers purposely defied apartheid legislation with the hope that they could overwhelm the system and render apartheid inoperable. More than 8,000 people went to jail for failing to carry passes, violating the curfew on Africans, and entering locations or public facilities that were designated for one race only.
Mini was among that force of 8,000. He marched into a whites-only railway property and refused to leave. He was arrested and sentenced to imprisonment in the newly built North End prison. The Afrikaners had a different name for it, the Red Hell.
They said, "This is the hell, which is so red. You are going to suffer here in the red hell."
North End prison was so violent that lawyers were afraid to defend protesters because they might be imprisoned as well. Inmates were beaten, strangled, and subjected to electric shocks.
Torture was their daily bread.
Mini spent 3 months in the Red Hell. When he was released, he was still committed to non-violence, but like his bus boycott, the Defiance campaign's success had been mixed.
It did not lead to the repeal of any unjust legislation, but it did help to grow the membership of the African National Congress, some estimates suggest tenfold.
The regime took notice of this grassroots movement. It launched a campaign of its own.
The state responded with a massive crackdown on resistance organizations.
During the Second World War, the Communist Soviet Union allied with the United States, Britain, and other powers to defeat the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan. After the war, though, that alliance between East and West broke down. A new era began, the Cold War. Western powers, principally the United States, became strongly anti-communist. This became a fixation, and often a pretext for broader repression. In South Africa, for example, communism was banned, but the definition of communism was extremely broad.
Such basic things as furthering animosity amongst the races could be interpreted as communism.
With their opposition to white supremacy, the ANC could easily be defined as communist, whether or not it actually was. The 5th of December, 1956. Police raided the homes of dozens of people associated with the ANC and similar groups. They threw these people into jail on suspicion of treason. Mini was among those arrested. This time, he was imprisoned in Johannesburg. The accused were placed in cramped cells with many others. Among them were names that became famous in the anti-apartheid movement, including Walter Sisulu and Nelson Mandela. Though the conditions were miserable, prison gave these activists an opportunity to talk and plan.
Inside the jail, there were quite fierce debates about the history of the African National Congress, the future of the liberation struggle and the strategies and tactics that were best suited for advancing freedom.
To fire up these debates, Mini led the prisoners in singing freedom songs. Nelson Mandela remembered, "We sang at the top of our lungs, and it kept our spirits high." In jail, Mini wrote a new song directly attacking the regime called "Africa is Going to Trample on You, Verwoerd." 156 people were put on trial for treason.
All 156 would be discharged or acquitted. And at moments, the trial was quite farcical. The state looked foolish in attempting to prove the charge of treason.
On the 20th of April, 1959, Mini was released. His life was becoming a cycle of protest and imprisonment, but the end of apartheid felt tantalizingly close. After all, it was only a recent invention. Many hoped it could be repealed just as quickly. Across the continent of Africa, the movement for decolonisation scored major victories.
Especially in the second half of the 1950s, people in South Africa are watching Ghana, Guinea, Egypt. And so there really is this belief that change is on the horizon and that it is possible.
But that belief was shattered on the 21st of March 1960. A nationwide protest against the pass system was organised that day. Protesters showed up to police stations without their passbooks. The idea was that they'd be arrested, overwhelming the prison system. In the town of Sharpeville, large numbers came out.
Police reinforcements arrived, and they failed to intimidate protesters into dispersing. A scuffle turned into a massacre as police opened fire indiscriminately. As the crowd fled, many more were shot in the back. Altogether, 69 people died, and another 180 were wounded.
This massacre became international front-page news. Across the world, many people and governments were horrified by the violence.
This became a crisis for the South African state. The United Nations blamed the apartheid state for the killings, but the government's response was the declaration of a national emergency that gave police greater powers of search, arrest, and detention without trial.
The regime banned the ANC. Suddenly, the terms of the struggle had changed. Mini decided that his days of non-violent protest were at an end.
These men had been watching violence in rural communities and sought to take control of that violence. They launched what became known as Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation, to launch guerrilla actions, and they hoped eventually to launch an armed liberation struggle that mobilized the masses.
In 1961, Mini was among the first to join Umkhonto we Sizwe, known as MK. By now, he had a lot to lose, including a wife and children at home. But he'd warned the regime to beware of the black man, and he meant to make good on that promise.
They read science textbooks and stole chemicals to build bombs and wage a sabotage campaign against apartheid infrastructure.
MK planned to make its debut on the 16th of December, 1961. On that day, MK launched simultaneous acts of sabotage in Johannesburg, Durban, and Port Elizabeth. They detonated homemade bombs, attacking symbols of apartheid. The state response was swift and harsh. In Port Elizabeth, 6 men were arrested. Vuyisile Mini remembers hearing of their treatment.
Now the 6 was charged and tortured, and 3 became state witness against other people.
Word got around about these 3 prisoners who turned state witnesses. As far as many others were concerned, that made them traitors to the movement.
Some people were saying those 3 that were state witnesses must be punished.
One of the alleged informers was named Sipho Mange. We don't know what Mini thought of him, but one way or another, Mange played a critical role in Mini's life.
Mange was found shot dead.
To this day, no one knows who killed Sipho Mange, but the regime saw a golden opportunity.
Police, of course, were saying those people who killed that man were sent by high command. So Mini sent somebody to kill Mange.
Nothing directly connected Mini to the crime. There were no witnesses claiming his involvement. But on the 10th of May 1963, he was apprehended, along with two other prominent members of the ANC, Wilson Kaingo and Zinakile Mkaba. The men were charged with 17 counts of sabotage and with complicity in the murder of Sipho Mange.
No one could be pointed out who went there to kill that man. So they were saying there should be the benefit of the doubt in this case.
But the regime was determined to break up the resistance and eliminate its leadership. In March 1964, Mini and his comrades were found guilty.
The sentence was capital punishment, meaning they were sentenced to death immediately.
This sentence caused shockwaves around the world. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, U Thant, issued an appeal for clemency.
Appeals were made that they must not give penalty of that nature to people with a case which is not clear.
But by now, the South African regime was accustomed to acting with impunity. Mini and his comrades awaited execution in Pretoria Central Jail. In his cell, Mini was visited by a captain from the South African Security Force. The captain had questions about the commander of the ANC's paramilitary wing. He offered Mini a deal.
If you can give us high command, and then we can save you so that you go and grow your children, feed your family.
The captain would give him back his life if he gave up his comrades.
But Mini was not the man to be easily turned to be an informer. He resisted terribly.
Mini refused the captain's offer. As the captain left, he asked if Mini planned to say Amandla Nawetu when he was led to the gallows. Amandla Nawetu was one of the rallying cries of the anti-apartheid movement, meaning power to the people. Mini answered yes. The 5th of November, 1964. A guard came to Mini and his comrades.
They were told that tomorrow at 7 you are taken up to be hanged.
The anticipation was unbearable. Wilson Kaingo was in shock.
Kaingo became shivering, became weak.
Mini knew how to embolden the men in the face of impending death.
The whole night they were singing.
They sang freedom songs. They sang songs of struggle. They sang about the future when their cause would triumph. Another prisoner on the block described the sound of their voices as heroic, but the songs as melancholy, touched by the knowledge that their end was near. Eventually, a hush settled on the prison. Night became morning. As soon as the cell was opened,
Mini jumped out singing, "Dance into dimnya my village food, dance into dimnya my village food."
his comrades joined in the song. The guard ordered silence, but nothing could stop them now. Mini led the men in song all the way up to the gallows.
It's wonderful that those that were with him became a little bit stronger through his braveness.
Historians don't know if Mini and his comrades said Amandla Nawetu. The official records don't mention it. We only know about the singing because other prisoners heard it from their cells. But that tells us something about the spirit with which these men went to their execution. The executioners tied the blindfolds around the three men's heads. Nooses were hung about their necks. There was a solemn pause.
Then the platform goes down, then it's finished.
Vuyisile Mini was 44 years old when he was executed. He, Kaingo and Mkaba were the first MK operatives to be executed by the regime. Mini knew all along that he wouldn't get out of prison alive. Shortly before his execution, he bought plots for graves for himself and his comrades in Port Elizabeth. But the authorities had no intention of letting their grave sites become monuments of martyrdom.
He was buried in a pauper's grave and only exhumed and given a proper burial after the advent of democracy in South Africa.
News of his death sparked outrage. It reached the ears of Vuyisile Chuchu, whose life had dramatically changed in the years since he met Mini.
That time we were also in prison for being a member of the ANC.
Chuchu was arrested for furthering the aims of a banned political organisation. The arrest came in the hours before dawn, when he was still in bed.
On the arrest, there was no chance to dress, no chance. You can go with what you had put on before the police came in, out barefooted.
He was taken to the Red Hell. 4 days after Mini's death, he was summoned from his cell to learn his sentence.
On the 10th of November 1964, sentenced to 9 years.
Chuchu was transferred to Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was being held. Chuchu was imprisoned on that island for 7 years. After his release, he was banished to a distant location in the Eastern Cape. A few years later, he was arrested again, charged with terrorism, and sentenced to 25 more years on Robben Island. In 1991, when the apartheid regime was finally disintegrating, Chuchu was released. Just like the men who died alongside Mini, Chuchu drew courage from his comrades in the struggle.
We stood everything which was done to us.
Mini's music captured that indomitable spirit. A year after his death, in 1965, the American superstar and civil rights activist Harry Belafonte recorded an album in African languages such as Zulu, Sotho and Swahili with the South African singer Miriam Makeba. One of the songs was Beware Verwoerd. Until now, the song had just passed around through word of mouth. But the recording catapulted Mini's music to a new level of fame.
The mobilization of song was particularly important in the international anti-apartheid movement. Exiled artists such as Miriam Makeba raised awareness globally of apartheid's evils via their performances.
In South Africa, the regime knew that people around the world could now sing Mini's words in the hope of its eventual demise. Mini once wrote a song with the words, "Let this gospel spread. Around the whole world, it should be heard." And now it was.